Arizona Territory, 1879. The wind was dry, the sun cruel, and Delaney Ellison had blood on her hands that was not her own. She held her rifle tight as she limped through the cactus-shadowed ridge, dust in her mouth, her dress torn at the hem, and the outline of two small children trailing behind her. Her boots were soaked from crossing the Gila River at dawn, but she had not stopped walking. "Keep close," she whispered to Vella and Vance, her 6-year-old twins. Their eyes were wide but quiet, like they had learned too early what silence could keep at bay. They had been running for 2 days. Delaney's husband had walked out 5 months ago with a bottle and a pack horse, saying he was headed to Tucson for work. He never came back. Last week, the ranch hands he owed money to showed up drunk, demanding payment. When she had none, they turned violent. One of them tried to grab Vella. Delaney shot him. She did not wait to see if he lived. Now she was on the run with her children and a Winchester rifle, going nowhere she knew, only away. She crested a hill and saw smoke curling from a cabin chimney down in a shallow valley. Her heart bucked like a wild colt. The children were too tired to keep walking much longer. She could not let them die in the desert. Delaney crouched behind a rock and studied the cabin. It looked solid, built by hand, not slapped together. A corral stood to the side, a single chestnut horse grazing. She saw a man chopping wood by the shed, tall, broad-shouldered, his shirt damp with sweat. He paused, wiped his brow, and looked toward the ridge like he felt her watching. Delaney raised her rifle. He saw her. He did not move. "What do you want?" he called up, voice steady, deep. "I got 2 children with me," she shouted back. "We need water." He nodded once, then laid down his axe and stepped back from it. "You can come down," he said. "Bring the rifle if you want." Delaney hesitated, then looked at her children. Vella clung to her dress. Vance's lips were cracked. She slung the rifle over her shoulder and started down the slope. The man waited at the edge of the yard, arms loose at his sides. He looked to be in his late 20s, maybe 30, with sun-browned skin and sharp gray eyes under the brim of his hat. His hair was dark, curling at the collar, and his face was quiet like he had seen things and survived them. "I'm Lawson Everett," he said. "Delaney Ellison. These are my children." He opened the cabin door. "Come inside. Water's on the table." She stepped in carefully, scanning the room. It was clean. Plain furniture, a cot in the corner, a table with 3 chairs. No sign of anyone else. "You live alone?" she asked. He nodded. "Since spring." Delaney poured water into tin cups with shaking hands. Vella and Vance drank first. She watched them, her jaw tight. Lawson leaned against the doorway, not pushing, not asking. "Why are you out here?" "I shot a man," she said. He gave the smallest nod. "Was it right?" "It was necessary." "Then you did right." She looked at him then, really looked. "You believe that?" "I have seen worse men walk free," he said, "and better women punished for less." Delaney sat down slow, her legs felt hollow. "I do not trust easy," she said. "I will earn it," he replied, eyes steady on hers. "Every day." Vella reached up and tugged Delaney's sleeve. "Can we stay here, Mama?" Delaney's throat closed up. She looked at Lawson. He crouched to Vella's height. "You can stay as long as you need. I got enough food and I keep a clean place. You'll be safe here." Delaney studied him for a long moment. "If we stay, you do not get to ask questions I do not want to answer." He stood. "Fair enough." That night, Delaney curled up with her children on the cot while Lawson spread a blanket on the floor. He did not look at her too long, did not try to make her talk. He just kept the fire going and sat reading an old book until the flames dimmed. Days passed. Delaney helped cook and mend, kept the children close. Lawson never raised his voice, never pushed too hard. He taught Vance how to whittle and showed Vella how to feed the chickens without getting pecked. Delaney started sleeping through the night. One morning, she was hanging laundry behind the cabin when Lawson came up holding a small wooden carving. "For the boy," he said. "He likes horses." Delaney took it, fingers brushing his. "Thank you," he shrugged, but his ears flushed red. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Delaney stood by the fire. "You really alone out here?" she asked. Lawson nodded. "Had a brother, died in the war, parents gone." "Why stay?" "Peace," he said. "Nothing out here lies to you." Delaney met his eyes. "You do not seem like a liar." "I am not." The air shifted, quiet and warm. She stepped closer. "You mean it, about earning trust," he nodded. "Every single day." She reached out and touched his chest just over his heart. It beat steady under her hand. "Then do not lie to me," she said. "Ever? I will not." And she believed him, not all the way, not yet, but enough to let her hand stay there a little longer. The wind outside howled softly across the hills. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, and something else had begun to warm, something steady, something real. And Delaney, who had not trusted anyone in a long time, let herself hope. The first frost came early that year, a thin silver glaze on the cedar fence posts before dawn, and Delaney rose before the children stirred to bring in firewood from the lean-to. Her fingers were red by the time she stacked the kindling beside the hearth, but the work steadied her in a way she didn't question. Lawson was already outside. She saw him through the window, crouched beside the chicken coop, stitching new wire into place where a coyote had torn through the night before. He moved with quiet purpose, not fast, not slow, just exact. Vance had been the one to spot the tracks at first light, barefoot and half awake, pointing with a whisper. Delaney poured a ladle of hot water into a basin and scrubbed her hands clean. Behind her, the cabin filled with the soft creak of the floorboards as Vela tiptoed out from the cot, hair tangled, eyes still heavy with sleep. She wrapped her arms around Delaney's waist without saying a word. By midday, the wind picked up and the air turned sharp. Delaney wrapped the children in shawls before letting them out to play near the woodpile, where Lawson had built them a ring of stones to keep within. He had done it without asking, just laid the boundary as if he knew what it meant to give a child something solid to lean against. She found him later in the barn, fixing a cracked stirrup on his saddle. The place smelled of old hay and horse oil. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "You always patch things yourself." He didn't look up. "Doesn't seem right to throw something away just 'cause it's worn." Delaney stepped inside, the boards cool beneath her boots. "You think that's true of people too?" He paused, lifted his head. "Only if they want to be mended." She studied him, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his hands moved, careful but sure. "What if they don't know how? You give them time," he said. "And room to figure it out." She let the silence stretch between them, filled only by the creak of leather and the wind brushing against the roof. Then she asked, "You ever been married?" "No," he said. "Thought about it once." "Long time back. What happened?" "She married someone else." Delaney nodded once. "You still think about her, not in the way I used to." She sat down on a bale of hay, tucking her skirts under her knees. "I don't miss my husband. I didn't figure you did. I was 16 when we wed. My father owed him 3 head of cattle. That's what I was worth." Lawson didn't speak. He set the saddle aside and sat across from her, elbows on his knees. He wasn't all bad, not at first, but the good never lasted long, and it never stayed mine. "You're not his anymore," Lawson said. "No," she agreed, "but I still jump every time a door slams." He nodded. "That's not weakness, Delaney, that's memory." They sat in the fading light, the barn growing cooler around them. She looked down at her hands, at the scar across her palm where she'd sliced herself years ago trying to cut rope too fast. "I don't know what kind of woman I'd be if I hadn't had the twins," she said. "They made you stronger," he said. "They made me softer, too. Doesn't have to be either or." Delaney looked at him then, really looked. The way his eyes didn't flinch, the way his voice didn't rise or fall for effect. He was just there, solid. "I can't offer much," she said. "Not with what I've come from." "I don't want much," he replied. "Only truth." She stood, walked over, and offered her hand. He took it, no hesitation. "Then I'll try," she said, "but slow." "I've got time," he said. That night, she let him sit near her by the fire while the children slept. She didn't pull away when his arm brushed hers. She didn't speak much, but she didn't need to. He kept the silence company, and that was enough. Outside, the first snowflakes fell, soft as breath. Inside, 2 people sat side by side, not needing to name what was growing between them, not yet. But soon, the rain started slow, barely more than mist, but by mid-afternoon it had turned steady, soaking the ground and turning the narrow trail behind the cabin into a ribbon of mud. Delaney stood at the threshold, her shawl pulled tight around her shoulders, watching the gray sky press low over the hills. She didn't mind the wet. Rain meant water in the barrels, soft soil for planting. It also meant quiet, no wagons, no riders. Behind her, Vella and Vance sat cross-legged near the hearth, sorting a tin of dried beans by color. Lawson had built a small shelf for them the day before, just wide enough to hold the children's few things: a folded blanket, 2 worn readers, a pine cone Vella refused to part with. He hadn't said anything about it, just left it there in the corner while the twins were outside. Delaney turned as the door opened behind her. Lawson stepped in, shaking water from his hat. His sleeves were rolled, his forearms streaked with dirt, and his eyes settled on her with a kind of quiet attention that made her breath catch, though she tried not to show it. "I cleared the trench behind the shed," he said. "Should keep from backing into the root cellar." She nodded, stepping aside so he could hang up his coat. "You always this steady when things go sideways." "I don't favor panic," he said. "Doesn't fix much." She watched him stretch his hands near the fire, the way his fingers flexed slow from the cold. "Did you learn that from your brother?" He didn't answer right away. The fire popped. Vance looked up, then went back to his sorting. "No," Lawson said at last. "He was the kind to meet trouble headlong. I'm not built that way." Delaney leaned against the doorframe, her voice low. "You ever see him in dreams?" He looked at her, the barest crease between his brows. "Sometimes. Mostly when I'm not expecting it." "I saw the man I shot again last night," she said. "In my sleep." He didn't say anything, just stood there, holding his side like he was waiting to see if I'd finished the job. Lawson didn't flinch. "What did you do?" I told him I'd already buried the part of me that would hesitate. He stepped closer, not touching her, not crowding her either. "You want to talk about it?" She shook her head. "I just want to know it won't always feel like I'm living on the edge of something sharp." His voice was quiet. "It won't." She looked up at him, then glanced toward the children. "They're starting to ask how long we'll stay." "What did you tell them?" "That we'd stay until the ground thawed." She hesitated. "But the truth is I don't want to leave. Not unless we're forced." Lawson's hand brushed the edge of the table, fingers curling around the wood grain. "Then stay. It's not that simple." "It could be." Delaney moved past him but stopped near the stove, her back to him. "What if you wake up one morning and decide we've been here too long, that you want your quiet back?" "I already gave it up," he said. "The day you stepped down that ridge." She turned then, slowly, eyes searching his. "You sure about that?" "I am." She crossed to him, each step deliberate. "I don't believe in promises." "I'm not offering one," he said. "I'm offering presence every morning, every night." "Until you tell me not to." Her throat tightened. She looked away, then back. "I don't trust easy." "I know," he said. "Then I'll earn it every day." Delaney didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his. Outside, the rain eased into a hush. Inside, the quiet between them no longer held distance, but something softer, something shared. Later, when the children had curled beneath their quilts and the fire burned low, she stood beside Lawson at the window. He didn't speak. Neither did she. But when she leaned into his side, he folded his arm around her without hesitation. And for the first time in years, Delaney did not feel like she was waiting for the sky to fall. The wind had changed. It came down from the Mogollon Rim in long, cold breaths, carrying pine scent and the hush of winter not far off. Delaney pulled the kettle from the hook above the stove, her hands steady, though her thoughts were not. She glanced through the window at Lawson and Vance, who were near the line of sycamores, measuring a new fence run with twine and sharpened stakes. Vella sat at the table behind her, practicing letters with a bit of charcoal and the back of an old ledger, tongue caught between her teeth in quiet concentration. Lawson hadn't asked Delaney to stay. Not again. He hadn't needed to. She found herself rising earlier these days, not from fear but to make use of the light. She'd mended the torn seams in the children's sleeves, spun wool into thread, even started sketching a plan for a henhouse addition. These were not the acts of someone passing through. She poured hot water into the pan of oats and stirred slow, watching steam rise. When the door opened, Lawson stepped inside, cheeks ruddy from the chill, Vance close behind cradling a bundle of kindling. Delaney handed him a cloth to wipe his hands, and he took it with a nod. "We found a deadfall near the creek," Lawson said, setting a coil of rope by the door. "Might be good for planks come spring." "Is it sound?" "Dry to the heart," he said. "Didn't rot in the root." She nodded once, then turned back to the stove. After the children were settled with their bowls, Lawson leaned against the wall near the hearth. You ever think about putting down roots? Delaney didn't look up. Roots can be torn out, so can fence posts. Doesn't mean you stop driving them in. She turned then, slowly, her eyes holding his. You want me to say it plain, if you're ready. She wiped her hands on her apron, then crossed the room and stood before him. I want to stay, not just through the thaw, not just until they're grown. I want to build something that won't vanish in the next hard season. Lawson's jaw shifted, but his eyes didn't waver. Then we start with the corners, something square. Something honest. I don't want to marry out of safety, I wouldn't ask you to, and I won't let my children wake up to shouting ever again. They won't, she breathed once, deep and slow. Then I'm not leaving. Lawson reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing hers. I'll lay the first beam tomorrow, you can draw the rest. She let her hand stay in his. It won't be easy. It doesn't have to be. Vella looked up then, her voice small. Mama, are we staying forever? Delaney knelt beside her, brushing a curl behind her ear. As long as the roof holds and the heart's firm beneath it, Lawson spoke from where he stood. We'll build it strong enough for both. Vance grinned around a spoonful of oats. Can we have a dog? Delaney laughed, the sound unfamiliar and welcome all at once. One thing at a time. That night, after the children had gone to sleep, Delaney stepped out onto the porch. The stars were brittle bright, the air clean as washed tin. Lawson joined her without a word, bringing 2 mugs of warm cider. She took hers, sipped, then looked out across the dark valley. You know what I miss most, she said. Not being afraid of quiet. Lawson's voice was low. You don't have to be anymore, she turned to him. I'm not. They stood like that a long time, shoulder to shoulder, the hush between them no longer hollow but whole. And when she reached for his hand again, it was not out of fear or need or habit but choice. He laced their fingers together and didn't let go. Lawson lifted the last beam into place as the sun settled low behind the hills, gold light catching on the fresh sawn wood. Delaney stood below, her skirts dusted with cedar shavings, arms crossed against the late autumn chill. Vella and Vance sat on the stump nearby, watching like they were witnessing something sacred. You want it flush, he called down. Flush and square, she answered. He shifted the timber a hair, then drove in the peg with 3 clean strikes. The sound echoed through the valley, deep and solid. The frame of the new room, the first expansion of the cabin, stood tall against the sky. Delaney exhaled, long and even. It's good. Lawson climbed down the ladder, wiping his hands on a cloth. We'll chink it tomorrow before the cold sets in. She nodded, then turned to the children. Inside now, both of you. Get your hands washed. Vance stretched, eyes wide with admiration. That room's ours. We'll see, Delaney said, lifting an eyebrow. Depends on who keeps their boots dry and minds the door latch. They ran inside without protest. Lawson leaned against the ladder, watching her. You ever think we'd get this far? I used to think I wouldn't get anywhere, she said. Now I don't think about where, just who. You've got a steady hand, he said, glancing at the frame. She looked at him, the corners of her mouth softening. So do you. They stood in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. Tomorrow's the end of the month, Lawson said. There's a preacher coming through from St. David, headed to the mining camp past the ridge. Delaney studied him. You thinking of confessing something? He smiled, quiet. I was thinking we might ask him to stop here. She didn't answer right away. The light was fading and the air smelled of pine and horses and dry earth. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. I never had a ring. Not even a proper vow. I can give you both, he said. If you want them. She stepped closer, her voice barely above the breeze. I want the life more than the promise. You'll have it. Delaney reached for his hand. Then let's make it official. They didn't speak again until they were inside, the fire warm, the children drowsing near the hearth. Lawson took something from the shelf, a small leather pouch. He opened it and showed her a plain silver ring, worn smooth. My mother's, he said. She wore it 42 years before she passed. Delaney traced its curve with her finger. I'll wear it longer. At dawn, the preacher arrived on a mule, his coat dusty and his voice soft. There were no flowers, no guests, only the 4 of them on the porch, the sky pale and clear. Vella held a sprig of dried sage. Vance stood tall, holding the ring in both hands. Lawson looked at Delaney like nothing else had ever been certain. I take you, Delaney, because you are strong in ways that don't shout, because you don't bend easy. Because you made a home out of ruins. Her voice didn't waver. I take you, Lawson, because you see without asking, because you build what doesn't break, because you never made me feel owed. When the preacher let silence fall, Lawson slipped the ring onto her finger. Vela smiled without a word. Vance let out a quiet breath like he'd been holding it for days. They signed the ledger the preacher carried, and he moved on before the sun cleared the ridge. That night, the four of them sat on the floor of the new room, still without a roof, stars above them like scattered seeds. Delaney leaned against Lawson's chest, his arms loose around her. The children curled under a quilt, whispering about dogs and chickens and what to name the room. We've got walls, Delaney murmured. Lawson kissed her temple. We've got more than that. She tilted her head to look at him. I'm not afraid anymore. Neither am I. Years passed. The room was finished before the first heavy snow. In spring, they planted rows of squash and beans. Delaney taught Vela to quilt and Vance learned to ride bareback. They built a second coop. A dog followed them home one day, ribs showing, tail cautious. They named him Flint. Delaney woke every morning to the smell of coffee and the sound of Lawson splitting wood. She no longer flinched at wind against the door, no longer waited for the past to knock. She wore the silver ring every day. It dulled over time, but never tarnished. Lawson never left, not once. He never raised his voice, never turned away in silence. He stayed through rain, through dry seasons, through every ache and joy they built together. And Delaney, who had once walked through dust and fear, now walked barefoot across her own land, with her children growing strong beside her and her husband's hand warm in hers. They never spoke of the road behind them. They didn't need to. The life they built was proof enough.